Hey everyone, and welcome to Timeless. If you are a paper player who's been looking to get into Arena's coolest format, this is the video for you. You can see I'm on a fresh account, and today I'm going to show you how to actually get into the format, all free to play. The reason I'm doing this today is because of the new community budget decklist project. A bunch of community members, led by Bookworm, have been taking the initiative and putting together a bunch of guides on how you can, with just the resources you get on a fresh account, build a budget version of a deck and then slowly upgrade it piece by piece into an actual stock timeless list. We're currently working on it, and there's already a bunch of decks built out. We're going to do energy for this one because it's one of my favorite decks, and it's a great deck to learn the format on, in my opinion. If you're new, it's a highly interactive deck, so if you like fair interactive strategies, this is it. And I know a lot of people from other formats like Modern might be familiar with the Modern Horizons Energy Creature core. You get to play all of those Modern Horizons creatures from MH3 and Bragavan, and a couple of cool alchemy cards like Juggernaut Peddler that we'll see later. But what's really interesting is a lot of the interaction in this deck is uncommon. Things like Swords to Plowshares, Static Prison, those are easily craftable, and it's all in white. So what the community has figured out is that if you slowly walk it back and strip the deck to its bare minimum, what you could do is you could replace all of those rares and mythics with a bunch of really cheap common and uncommon Soul Sister style cards, like Soul Warden, that you can see right here, or Johnny's Pridemate. And the deck's not going to be as good as the tier deck, obviously, but it's going to be decent. And it's a starting point where there's 0 extra rares required. Slowly upgrade this into the meta deck list as you complete quests and get gold, and you slowly get wildcards on your account. So I'm going to try to take this new account to Mythic and build up to this stock deck list. Hopefully we can get to Mythic within a month of me making the account, a month or two of casual play. That would be awesome. All right, as for new account resources, we started with very little, unfortunately. We got 0 of every wild card and 0 gems. We did get some packs, and we have 22 inbox notifications that there is no claim all button, so I guess I'll claim these one at a time really quick. Okay, that actually gave us a lot in terms of packs, and we're not actually done. If you go to store, there should be a spot to redeem codes. Now, interestingly, a lot of you guys might know that you can type codes in here to the store to get free stuff, but this is actually something that they've sunset. What we just did, claiming stuff out of our notifications there, kind of replaced those codes. So unfortunately, we don't get any extra freebies here. But we do have 5 jump-in tokens, and that's the one thing that we could do before we construct a deck. So I'm going to go ahead and play that 5 times on this fresh account and just see if we get any sort of cool rewards for it. I did my 5 jump-ins, which gave me an achievement. This doesn't really do anything for your account, so you can honestly skip the jump-ins. They just give you a bunch of standard legal cards. It's helpful if you're trying to play standard, but for Timeless, what we really want to do is we want to rip some packs and get some wild cards. Little reminder, while we have some dead air while cracking packs, the main reason we're opening these in bulk is for the wild cards. You get 1 rare wild card guaranteed every 6 packs, and every 24 you will get a mythic instead of a rare. It's that spinner you could see towards the right-hand side of the screen, top right. All right, so I opened our starting packs. I think we got slightly below average luck because I think when the community looked into us, 4 mythics and 12 rares is what's average. Now, we do have a little bit of extra gold, and what you can do if you're an experienced Magic player is enter limited events with this, get extra cards from limited, and then try to go infinite. You do make a lot of gems and gold in packs if you are very good at limited, even if you're just going soft infinite. But for the sake of simplicity in this tutorial, I want this to be something that like everybody can do. And I don't want this to be off of limited skill, is we're going to go to Modern Horizons 3 right here, and if we ever have money, we're just going to buy a Modern Horizons pack. We have 2,000 gold. I'm going to buy 2 Modern Horizons packs, and we're going to keep the decision making as simple as possible. This is going to get us an 11th rare wild card, and hopefully we rip like a Guide of Souls or something that we actually want for our deck. We got a Mythic instead, so I'm absolutely not going to complain about that. We also do have enough to build the absolute most ultra budget version of Energy, which is the mono white version, at just 4 mythics and 6 rares. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that together in the deck builder really quick. All right, the budget decklist project actually has everything in Moxfield so that you can go ahead and just export it to Arena. So right here, we are actually short on common and uncommon wildcards, which is funny. That's not something that I was actually expecting here. So for the time being, we have some choices. We could either just like play BO1, or we can just go ahead and cut like some random uncommons. Unfortunately, didn't get too many. So what exactly do we need for the deck and what are we short on? We're short on 13 uncommon wildcards. So we can do just some things like cutting for deserts here. We can go ahead and get rid of these razor grass ambushes as well. They are free rolls. in the mana base, but we're a little behind. Oh, we're playing Reprieve as well. All right, since we low rolled a little bit on getting enough uncommon wild cards for all of the cards in the deck, I'm going to take out Reprieve and one copy of Path to Exile just because these are cards that are not going to stay in the deck as we upgrade it. And I'm just going to add in these 4 random commons that we happen to rip here. Hinterland Sanctifier, and Impassioned Orator, which are just more Soul Warden effects. A random removal spell that we happen to open, why not? We're having fun here. And since we got lucky on the Mythics and we got 1 extra compared to what you usually get, I'm actually going to add 1 copy of a Johnny into the deck a little bit ahead of schedule because we can afford to craft him. So now we can craft all, redeem 41 wild cards, and would you look at that, we technically have a timeless deck. All right, so a lot of you might look at this and you might say, is this really timeless energy? It's not yet, but we crafted 0 rares and mythics outside of what we had to, and then we can just slowly start taking out the terrible cards from the deck. Probably cards like these are going to go first, and upgrading them for cards in the next step of the guide. So right now we're on ultra budget. We're going to move to budget Mardu energy, which is going to require a few more mythics and about 14 more rares. It's a big jump in rares because we're going to be building the mana base yet next to go 2 colors because we're going to want to be Boros energy and then eventually Mardu energy. Once we do get to Boros, we get to play some really busted cards like Amcrafter, which of course we don't own yet. But there's a lot of busted uncommons that are waiting for us as soon as we have enough rares to do the mana base. And I noticed that we got a little lucky with the mana base, and we actually did get like some random pieces of it, like Elegant Parlor. So every time you just happen to rip one of these out of a pack, it's 1 less wild card that you need to actually get playing timeless. And keep in mind, we're on a fresh account. We did 0 games, 0 limited. If you have had an arena account for a little bit, even just to play limited, you're going to be able to craft a much more complete deck than this. And like I said before, I'm going to keep this as straightforward and quote unquote brain dead as possible. All that I'm going to play is timeless ranked. I'm not going to try to play events. I'm really going to have to mute the audio because of Sparky. I'm not going to play events. I'm not going to play limited. I'm not going to try to farm resources. I am just going to play BO3 timeless ranked until we get to Mythic. And I'm just going to buy Modern Horizons packs with my money. And that's it. And I'm going to play a couple ranked games a day and hopefully we get somewhere in a month or 2. And I'm going to track everything on untapped.gg like usual. Let me make sure I have that set up. So unfortunately for us in the new account, the timeless player pool is pretty small, and Arena is going to try to match us against somebody who's new, but I feel a fair amount of the time it's not going to happen. What I know about the Arena matchmaker is that if you sit in queue for more than a minute, it starts to widen the pool of people you will play against. But we did get matched against another bronze player for our first game, thankfully. Alright, so for the rest of the video, I'm going to do a lot of the voiceover in post when I usually do things live, so it's going to be a bit different. We're going to mostly just compile things. I'm going to edit it and then voice over it, rather than showing every single bit of gameplay, because there's a lot. And there were a lot of interesting moments, but they certainly need to be edited and stitched together. I'm also going to hide people's usernames using either my camera here in post or just like a funny picture that I find. Just because I realize we are technically smurfing, and I don't want to be making fun of bronze players with their usernames when we do encounter them. So what's really funny is we actually queue right into show and tell for our first game, as you're about to see. My opponent has the fully decked out, crafted meta show and tell list with Chromox, Fast Mana, and everything. You see them in Print to Waterlog teachings, and at this point I know it's show and tell. There's not much I can do in game 1 on this deck. I don't have a lot of the main deck interaction to take down this deck. Really, all I can do is I can play my Ajani's Pride mates and turn them sideways and be a stubborn little bronze player and do my absolute best to rage against the machine and see if I can steal a game from show and tell. Unfortunately, my opponent does quite literally have turn 2 show and tell here, if you wouldn't guess it. So we're with our backs against the wall, but like a stubborn little bronze player, I decide to see if there is some sort of way that we can eke out this win. And I'll go ahead and speed this up a little bit, but we have 2 of Johnny's Pride mates in play, so I do kind of have hope that I can beat my opponent over the head with these Pride mates if things go my way. If. It's a big contingent. So we do get lucky and actually rip in Ocelot Pride off the top, which is funny, which allows us to make more tokens, make our Pride mates bigger, and keep growing our board. So if we're able to rip another creature, we will have Pride mates that are even bigger than Atraxa, which means that we can actually start attacking our opponent and maybe racing them, which is hilarious. And if you wouldn't guess, we drew Voice of Victory, which is very good. It's going to make a lot of tokens, which are going to, again, grow my Ajani's. My opponent does not want to block and trade here. So we're making more cat tokens on end step. City's Blessings. Our Pride Mates are getting huge. My opponent, tank, 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 ponder. Can they find an answer to actually deal with this? More brainstorming, more tanking, and that's going to be a concede. And I like this as a first game. This is very representative of how this series is going to go. We are going to get some silly games. We are going to end up in the fumble dimension, as you might want to call it. And it's interesting. I'm so glad that I got reminded, hey, just record every game just in case. Because when I set out to do this, I was really expecting all of these games to be boring and not worth recording, and I was just gonna kind of do an intro and then stats at the end. But we had a lot of priceless moments here, as people see. You see me sideboarding here, and there's a limited amount of cards that we actually bring in. We do have 8 cards for show and tell, and if you wouldn't believe it, the most common deck that I saw when I was in bronze and silver was show and tell. So I'm very glad I dedicated over half of my sideboard to it. Game 2, we actually get to keep a really good hand. We have Najati's Pride Mate that we can scale, so we have a very aggressive clock, and we have Deafening Silence as a sideboard card, so if my opponent does drop the early show and tell, we can shut off their omniscience-based lines. So I'm feeling pretty good that we might actually 2-0 our first game of playing this. My opponent does end up having the show and tell. I do the responsible thing and put in Deafening Silence, but it is just show and tell for Atraxa here. We do not have an answer for this Atraxa. We could try to use Mother of Runes to attack through it, so that's the line I start to take. But unfortunately for us, my opponent is just going to untap and drop a Culling Ritual here. And that is going to completely take us out of the game, so for my sanity, I just scoop it up and we go to game 3. Game 3, we get the opportunity to mulligan. I decided to mulligan once to try to find my sideboard cards because I have 8 of them. After one mulligan, I don't see any, so I decided to keep this hand because this has a good mix of lands and spells. It does let us just put on the aggro pressure if my opponent stumbles a little bit. So I'm just going to curve out and try to play creatures, try to make a bunch of energy, make a flying Voice of Victory, and hopefully get my opponent to 0 HP before they can actually win the game. Of course, my opponent always has to have the fast mana. They got the stack up on turn 2, stack up gaming. I'm just ordering my triggers like a good little diligent citizen, flying my creatures, getting them down to 10 HP, so we're getting them a bit close to lethal, but not quite there yet. My opponent's going to ponder, doing a little bit more setup, trying to find their combo. We do have Static Prison as a line of defense against Show and Tell Atraxa, or Show and Tell Omniscience without an instant speed win, and we are so close to actually killing them here. I think we end up being like 1 point of damage off after this combat. I throw the Static Prison out, just so that we can try to take them off of mana. And we were only 1 off of the kill there. And my opponent just has Show and Tell Atraxa, but thankfully, because of Mother of Runes, we actually do have lethal here. So, our hero, Igunda Horses, takes their first victory in Timeless against a meta deck playing Ajani's Pride Mate. And it feels good to be alive, man. I was really expecting things to be a lot easier on this account. I was expecting us to get paired against other people who were new to Magic. I was expecting it to be similar to the start of the metagame challenge, like, the first round where you sometimes queue against somebody who's playing their Final Fantasy standard deck because they didn't understand what format they were queuing for. I really thought the Arena Matchmaker would give us that. A lot of blatantly new players and people who were a little lost. But we got paired against meta decks a significant portion of the time, and for our second ever game, we got paired against Eldrazi. And Eldrazi's not exactly a timeless deck, but my opponent is at least playing the One Ring and Ancient Tomb and a few banned cards. And if you would believe me, this is actually one of the worst decks that we end up playing against in this video. Probably one of the top 3 worst decks. Almost everybody was bringing a meta deck or an attempt at playing banned cards in Timeless, such as Dark Ritual, Ancient Tomb, or Show and Tell, even if their builds were a little bit off meta. And we are able to take a game away from Eldrazi just by putting so much pressure onto them. And I'm not going to show every single game moving forward, but I'll include the win on game 2 against Eldrazi as well. My opponent Mindslavers me and then proceeds to take a lot of beneficial game actions, like things that benefit me. They cast my Luris. Thank you for spending my mana for me. They then mess up their Mindslaver attack by flying a creature unnecessarily with Guide of Souls when they didn't need to, and they just give me more free damage. Right? They clearly intend on blocking the Guide of Souls with the Thought Knots here, but then they just don't bother reading what my triggers do. And kind of get a lot of this in Bronze. You get a lot of people playing meta decks or close to them. I don't want to call Eldrazi a meta deck, but we get show and tell players who also seem insistent on kind of punting games away in increasingly magnificent fashion every single time. And we don't really get as many free wins from people playing bad decks as I was expecting, but we do get a lot of skill issue wins, if I can call it that. Next, we get an absolute gem of a Balustrade Spire player that we end up queuing against. And this is what I mean by players who seem to want to throw away games in unimaginable ways. I don't want to make fun of them again, so I'm going to hide the name, but it seems like they just Googled best timeless deck, copy pasted the list, and didn't have any idea of how they are supposed to pilot it. Because in this deck, you're supposed to aggressively mulligan towards your payoffs, right? You should be keeping Dark Ritual into Balustrade Spy. You shouldn't be keeping a 7-card hand that just happens to have a Grief in it. And you also should be reading Mother of Runes and what it does. And my opponent just plays Spy and does nothing and concedes. And they get so frustrated that they end up conceding the whole best of 3 here after this first game, losing to Soul Sisters Mother of Runes. And these are the kinds of free wins that we do end up getting on the challenge. Our first loss of the challenge ends up coming at the hands of Green Black Midrange. We are able to steal game 1 off of them just by going really, really wide with our mono white creatures and Luris to grind stuff back from the graveyard, but we end up losing both games 2 and games 3 to Weary Zone Guard based Strip Mine locks, unfortunately. Up next, we get matched against a show and tell player, and it's a bit more of what I mean when I say people who just picked up a deck for the first time in Timeless. Show and tell player here puts Omniscience into play, and they cast a Waterlog Teachings. Now, people who play Timeless know that this is a win on the spot. You Waterlog Teachings for Cyber Siphoner flashes back the Teachings, then that gets you Sublime Epiphany, and then you start copying your Siphoner. Assuming the meta deck list, they have all of these cards in their deck in game 1, but instead they choose to tutor the wrong card off of Teachings. They still grab their Cyber Siphoner anyway, and then Cyber Siphoner does not flashback Teachings for the win. Instead, they just flashback Dig Through Time, and of course, they're still able to win anyway by playing an Emrakul here. But it's odd to see them not go for the quote-unquote correct line here when I am completely tapped out and unable to interact, but, it might not seem that bad that my opponent, did a suboptimal win. They won anyway, right? But maybe if you watch games 2 and 3, you'll be convinced that there is not any higher brain function going on here. So I put a Vexing Bauble into play when they cast Show and Tell, which is probably the most common sideboard card you will see against the Show and Tell deck in any format. It counters any spell that they don't play mana on, so they can't play cards off of Omniscience. My opponent reads Vexing Bauble. You can see they hovered it. They spent some time thinking about it, and they cast Culling Ritual into it anyway. Pause for a little bit, and let the Culling Ritual get countered on the stack. It's okay, right? We all make reading mistakes. But if you want to guess it, in game 3, the exact same thing happens. They cast Show and Tell. Put Bauble into play. My opponent attempts to Krosan Grip my Bauble. Yeah. And then Renoop Center to concede. I don't know. Sometimes you do the grip out of frustration, but I felt like that time they just didn't realize what was going to happen. We then get our one and only free game of the run so far. My opponent is just AFK here, so I end up getting a free win. And would you look at that? We are silver already, and we only lost 1 game so far in the trek up there. All right, I'm going to call day 1 there. On day 1, we went 6-1. Our only loss was to stock green black midrange. We beat stock show and tell twice, and we're in silver, so that's pretty good progress so far. Here's what the deck list is looking like. I took out some of the truly horrible commons and just put in some random cards I opened in packs, like this Battlesuit guy, and I think we're doing pretty well. By the way, if you're doing this yourself, because I was just clicking around seeing if there's any ways I can get more packs or more help, there are some really good first time deals that you can buy. Like both of these for $5 and then $15 are A really solid deal, and I think even these are okay deals for 25 and 50. Like if you truly are new to Arena, coming from Paper Legacy or Modern or whatever, you probably want to pick up some of these because if you get like these extra, what with this? If you spend 20 bucks, you get 6,000 gems and 5 packs. 6,000 gems is going to get you at least 30 packs, right? It will get you 35 packs, which is quite a few wild cards. You get one wild card every 6 packs guaranteed. But realistically, you get them even more frequently because you can get wild cards in the packs themselves randomly. You also get golden packs if you buy the right kinds of packs. Unfortunately, Modern Horizons does not give you that. But if you were to spend that little bit of money, we would probably have enough money right now to craft the Boros version. I am saving up my rares. There's realistically not too many upgrades that I could do to just this straight mono white version of the deck. I could try to craft more things like Voice of Victory, just more copies of that. But really, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save up my wild cards because the next rares that I want to craft are all red, or they're part of the mana base, right? So I want to be able to craft all of these lands so that I have good mana, and then craft Goblin Bombardment, and then in that time I should be able to get enough like random uncommon wild cards to be able to craft the Amped Raptor and the Unstable Amulet. We were really pinched on uncommons. We're down to only 2, but we should be able to open a few more packs and get a few more uncommon wild cards between now and then. We're also opening Modern Horizons packs, so realistically we're going to open quite a few of these. So let's see. Actually, I went for one more game and I ended up winning it because I realized I was at 14 out of 15 for my weeklies and they reset tomorrow. I happened to start this challenge on a Saturday and weeklies reset Sunday morning, so this is going to make this challenge slightly easier. All right, day 2. So both our dailies and our weeklies have reset, and I'm going to try to get the 15 daily wins required for the maximum rewards today. I'm generally going to try to play exactly those 15 wins every day to maximize this account, but probably won't get there every day. It's a weekend, so I have plenty of time for playing Magic, and I know I could refresh this quest to try to roll a 750 gold one, but this is the color of our deck, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it, honestly. And let's go ahead and queue up some more mono white. All right, game 1 of the day, we end up getting matched against Burn, and we end up beating them game 1, even though they had double natty Rolling Vortex to shut off our life gain. Game 2, we also end up smacking them with a bunch of Guided Souls, so that's a nice quick win to start the day, and we get rewarded by a pack, which we get to open. Doesn't get us anything relevant, but this gets us 1/6 of a rare wild card closer to our goals, and every pack is going to count here as we struggle through Timeless. Our next game, if you wouldn't guess it, we get paired against Show and Tell again. Oh boy. We put a Static Prison into play game 1 to get rid of their omniscience, and they have Waterlogged Teachings. And yet again, we get a Show and Tell player who seems blissfully unaware that they can win the game at instant speed here. They catch 2 Waterlogged Teachings, and neither of them gets a Cyber Siphoner to actually get the deterministic win here. Instead, they put a horror into play, which is fine, right? They get to bounce my Static Prison, they get to draw more cards, but this is just not a deterministic win when they do have a deterministic win in their deck. I do be stubborn for a little bit, seeing if my opponent will misplay and perhaps let me cast Swords to Plowshares, targeting that Hullbreaker Horror, allowing me to do something silly. But then I see an Atraxa and I say, okay, they're just going to start bouncing Atraxa. That's ridiculous. Game 2 gets very Mickey Mouse. I am able to exile their Omniscience with a Static Prison here, despite them going ahead and actually being able to Waterlog Teachings and slam a horror into play. Again, they could have just won on the spot with that Waterlog Teachings if they understood how to play their deck, but, you know, we're here. And unfortunately, I just don't have enough pressure to close this game out. You can see that there's only 3 energy in my resource pool. I only have so many creatures that can turn sideways, and my opponent was able to tutor there, and I'm assuming that they tutored for this Toxic Deluge that they go ahead and cast next turn. And that's the tilter of this account. You see somebody do pretty much everything wrong and still manage to run away with the game because, you know, they're playing a meta deck list and you are playing a Johnny's Pride mate. Up next, we get another specimen. It appears that someone has net decked the latest Dark Ritual deck without an idea of how to pilot a Necropotence deck. You see they keep 7 here, but their 7-card keep is Dark Ritual and Chrome Mox together, powering out a Grief. In this deck, you really want to be mulliganing towards your payoffs, and you want that Dark Ritual and Chrome Mox to be powering out either Beseech the Mirror or Necropotence itself. Maybe Sorin Alenda. Something similar to that, but my opponent just puts the Grief into play. The following turn, they do play Beseech the Mirror. I don't know if they just got lucky to draw it off the top or they intentionally sequenced it this way, but this would be the incorrect sequencing if they did do it this way. You should always go for the turn 1 Necro here. And because they waited an extra turn to play the Necro and they wasted a Dark Ritual playing Grief, they aren't able to put together the pieces to actually win against my deck in a decent amount of time. So they end up losing game 1. Game 2 rolls around. I am able to sideboard a lot of cards in. You'll see. I'm able to sideboard in all 4 Vexing Baubles and Deafening Silences. They're both good against Necropotent's deck and Show and Tell. That's why they're in the sideboard. And 2 Thought Partition, that white counterspell, or not counterspell, discard spell, which is generally pretty bad, but could be good against this deck in particular. And then we're going to be on the draw here. We see 2 Deafening Silences, so we keep it. Our opponent kept 6, so you would expect them, hopefully, to have a Necropotence or Payoff in their hand, but then they just grief me, Mega Land Drop, pass. Grief me, Mega Land Drop, pass. Once again, buddy, I understand. Timeless, it's a hard format. Very high skill cap, but you gotta mulligan those. And my opponent clearly had the sideboard guide open. They actually sideboarded correctly. If you saw there, they brought in Shadow of Mortality against Energy, which is correct, but they end up getting overpowered by arena exclusive, strictly worst, a Johnny's Pride Me, aka Hallowed Priest. We get a few more games here that aren't super noteworthy. We got paired against Affinity, and it turns out spamming white creature beats spamming artifacts when the white creatures get evasion from Guide of Souls. And then after that, we get paired against the only deck that I would call actively bad that we played against this whole time. We got paired against like a mono black Cards I Own pile, but this Cards I Own pile was still playing timeless legal cards such as Dark Ritual. So it wasn't totally free, and of course they're playing removal for our white creatures, but it was a match that we were able to win without too much difficulty. And then right as it starts to get easy, of course we get paired against stock meta Show and Tell. Again, game 1 they had a turn 3 Show and Tell Omniscience followed up by an Emrakul for a very easy and straightforward win. Once again we see Cyber Siphoner hitting play and not flashing back teachings. I'm going to lose it eventually, guys. Game 2, they did draw their Culling Ritual right on time. Perhaps I could have sequenced and played around it a little bit better, but there's only so much a white weenies deck can do against Show and Tell. And of course, they follow up the Culling Ritual with an immediate Omni-Tell here. And yeah, as soon as I think I might have a chance landing a Vexing Bauble and a Static Prison, they have yet another Culling Ritual to take us out of the game. And for those keeping track at home, that is our 3rd loss of the video, and spoiler alert, it's going to be the last one. We actually had a really good run, only dropping 3 games to get all the way up to gold. Up next, we get matched against Burn again, and if you couldn't guess, the Life Gain versus Burn matchup does end up being pretty free. After Burn, we get matched against a mono-red prison player, and I'm going to go ahead and let this game play out a little bit for context. At this point, my opponent plays a One Ring. They are quite favored considering they get protection of everything, they get to stall, they get to strip mine me. It's looking pretty bad. However, I realize that my opponent is going to get pretty low on life if they keep doing this. Even though I have no lands in play, my opponent just went down to 11, and this Guide of Souls can probably kill them. And they might not be able to draw answers off the One Ring. In fact, if they keep trying to draw answers off the One Ring, they are eventually going to run out of life. And my opponent, like the arena gamer they are, is going to repeatedly tap their Ancient Tomb to try and play a Ratchet Bomb that is 1 turn too slow to kill them, because Guide of Souls can hit them in the air for 3. One Ring is going to deal 2 damage, and that's the end of them. Game 2, we end up losing to Fury plus Chalice on 1, which is something that regular stock energy will struggle with quite a bit against mono red. And then game 3, we are able to absolutely overwhelm our mono red opponent with the combined power of design mistakes from the very old days of Magic and Modern Horizons 3 creatures working in tandem, holding hands as Richard Garfield intended. And that's the win that gets us up to gold. All right, let's take a look at the stats. In day 1, we managed an impressive 81% win rate, which is sweet. We did much, much better than I was expecting when getting paired against actual meta decks with our starter pile. We only dropped 3 games throughout the day. 2 of them were to stock Show and Tell, and 1 of them was to Golgari midrange strip blocking us. If we look at our matchups here, we played exactly 16 games, and our most common matchup being 4 of those games was Show and Tell, which we did manage to draw 2-2 with, which is a very respectable outcome, considering that I am playing a new player pile containing a Johnny's Pride Mate against the literal best deck in the format, We also have 4 matches recorded here against Mono Black, but that is actually 4 different decks. That was one Balustrade Spy deck, one Necropotence deck, one good Mono Black mid-range deck with like Opposition Agent and Children Wondering, that pile, and one kind of junky Rare Binder Mono Black deck. And overall, if you were to sum this up, we played against 9 decks that I would consider meta decks here. So more than half of our games were up against meta decks, and there were very few freebies that we were actually handed. Very few actual really bad players. And it's really strange because when I play on my main account, I don't even run into this much show and tell. If I got a quarter of my games or more being show and tell on my main account, I would say, wow, I need to add some more sideboard cards for show and tell. It's getting really popular. And more than half of my games were either Dark Ritual decks or show and tell decks, I would say, wow, the meta is really crazy. A lot of people are playing unfair piles. It's weird. Down here in Bronze, it seems like we're getting against more meta combo decks than when I play on my main account. And I thought about it a little bit, and I realized, when you get into the higher ranks and you're playing against other good players, you're playing against people who are good at Magic, good enough to get the high rank, but they play what they want. They play what they think is fun. And in these low ranks, you get the opposite. You get a lot of people who don't know what's going on. They do a single Google search and they find what they conclude to be the best deck in Timeless or the best for them to play. They don't know how to pilot it at all and they try their best and they don't get anywhere. They get stuck in Bronze because they don't put in the effort to actually learn the format. And it seems that everybody who has learned the format does eventually get bored of show and tell and move on to play their actual favorite pile once they move up to a high rank, occasionally bringing out show and tell for things like tournaments or if you want to grind for a high rank at the end of the season. I found it interesting. I just found it so interesting how many copy pasted meta decks we got down here, how little variation there was in some of them, and how, let's say, interesting the play was. I know we're down here technically smurfing, so I'm not going to show any of the players' names. There is the full history of matchups, but I can't show that without showing names. No harm meant to any of the people playing against me here. Timeless is a very high skill cap format. It's the hardest format on Arena. It has a lot of things that are very difficult to understand if you haven't played the format before. Like if you're picking up a Balustrade Spy or a Necro deck for the first time in your life, you might not understand exactly how you're supposed to abuse the London Mulligan because there's no decks in Standard or other Arena formats that really do abuse the London Mulligan. There's no other formats in Arena that force you to interact as quickly and as well as Timeless does. So people would also screw up playing Psychic Frog decks or screw up playing energy decks. Notably, we ran into 0 energy today, which was interesting, but I'm editing this after I've done quite a few more days of gameplay, so I promise you there will be a lot of energy and a lot of Psychic Frogs in our future. But I'm super happy with day 1. Under 3 hours of gameplay time, we're already gold. We had over an 80 win rate. Can't wait to get to Mythic, right guys? Oh boy.